What's up, you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? Today we're doing a generational one again. You know, getting back to our
Getting back to our roots.
roots of however many episodes we've done so far.
Yep.
uh,
They blend together at this point.
they do. It's one long conversation. And it's not just going to be generational. We're going to go over kind of party structure and what does it mean to be part of a political party, what does the political party stand for, and then we're going to kind of flow it into where mainly do millennials, us, sit as a whole and kind of like why we feel that way. And we'll probably talk a little bit about other generations and kind of where they sit on the party spectrum and how that fits into the political spectrum.
Yep, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to this. I've had a couple requests from people to just sort of put some basic terminology, some basic kind of political party information out there to help them
explain it, because I think especially for people like us, people who get really invested and involved in politics, this becomes such a back of the mind idea.
Yeah.
Like, you just assume that everybody has a solid grasp of what the parties mean, what they do,
Right.
and you forget that a lot of people don't make this their entire personality like we do. And
at least at parties when we're drinking.
so you know, it's a good thing to bring us back down to earth and be like, hey, this is what we're talking about when we say words like progressive and conservative and moderate, you know.
Moderate. I actually didn't see that term anywhere. Centrist was thrown around there a lot, but I didn't see a bunch of moderate stuff. But obviously
it's a term that's used a lot.
Oh yeah.
And I think we can give some talk to it without having to be thoroughly researched on the particular
I like
word.
the Webster Dictionary definition, please.
I can give you that too.
That'd be great. No, but so basically, you know, we're going to start from the top. You know, obviously, everybody knows the American, you know, system is really derives of two major political parties, which is actually somewhat unique in the world. You know, take a little bit step back. If you look at Europe, most European countries have 3-4 political parties that
At
have,
least,
major,
3-4 major, and then
Right.
a bunch. I mean, like, obviously the United States has other political parties.
Oh,
We got
yeah.
the Green Party,
Yeah.
Independent Party, Libertarian, like so on and so forth. But none of them are relevant.
No,
you know,
not,
like
not when it comes, you know, when rubber meets the road.
Right.
There's two that matter for us.
But in Europe, I mean, in their parliaments and stuff, they have 3, 4, 5 factions sitting in seats in their parliament making decisions that kind of run the gambit, and that's, you know, more choice is usually a good thing, right?
Yeah, usually, I don't think it's come. I don't think those places have more issues making laws and running a government than we do. So clearly, there may be some advantages to having some additional party and additional influence thrown around from here and there. But we're sort of stuck with what we got. I tried to find, you know, some real like political research and political, you know, statistical reasoning as to why there is only two. A lot of it comes down to just like, that's just the way it's always been.
But it's not the way it's always been. I mean, we've had a gamut of parties that don't even exist today through the years.
True. But they sort of died off at a certain point. They were popular for a short period of time, maybe a decade, I think, at most, for most of those. I think in the one thing I could find that was like directly like, this is how our elections are designed, is that most states are a winner-take-all state.
Yeah.
So if you win by 2% or 20%,
You win.
and you get all the votes. So instead of saying like, oh, well, that this person gets 30% and this person gets 20%, and this person gets 15%, whatever, they would get a representative amount of votes.
And I think this is important to put for the listeners on like a national scale with the president with the Electoral College.
Yeah,
this
that's
means,
just what I was looking at.
This means that like a state has, you know, a big state, like what does California have, 50-something electoral boards? Well, like 40% of the state votes Republican.
Oh, yeah.
But Republicans never win a statewide election in California. which means that the Democratic candidate gets all 54 of those votes, not 60%. And it's the same in Texas. You know, Texas is it's really close in Texas. It's like a 45-55.
Sure.
But you know, they always swing Republican, and that means that, again, another huge state, the second biggest electoral college-wise state in the country, gets all of the votes go to the Republican candidate, and that means that half those people's votes literally do not matter. They are literally thrown out because they weren't in the winning side.
Right, and it's sort of like, I think you can either have it two ways to have it be efficient or effective. Your voting. You can either have a voting method that people utilize, you know, like ranked choice voting or star method. They have different ways to sort of eke out like how to political gamemanship, or you have a not winner take all system, so that you just a straightforward vote, but then that vote is representative of what you want them to be. And that sort of takes away a little bit from the party system, because then you can say, well, if I get 30% here, 40% there, like that stuff adds up. And now it doesn't. And
right, and it gives you a way. You know, a political candidate could, in theory, go in all those states that are ignored all the time, like the Iowas and the North and South Dakotas, and be like, hey, I can pick up,
or Minnesota.
I can pick up some of these votes here and there, or even, you know, Republicans ignore California a lot because what's the point of spending time and money there? Which means a lot of Republicans in California don't get their interests heard.
Right.
And again, obviously, I'm not generally supportive of most Republican policy, but the fact is that it's not fair to them any more than it's fair to Democrats in Texas.
It's having winner take all. It reduces the amount of democracy that we have, the effectiveness of our democracy for every citizen, unless you live in like a few battleground states.
Yeah, and there's a few, and those are the only ones that get any attention.
Right, which is obviously ridiculous to think that, you know, 5 states get 90% of the attention when they're 10% of the states. So like, I don't think anybody could defend that and be like, yep, I really, really want to keep it that way. But the power is within our politicians to make a change, and you know, the corporate structures and the power structure that we have right now is cemented in place as long as that is still the way that we do elections. But it can change on a state-by-state basis.
It can.
It is really tough to do on a state-by-state basis, because that would mean that you're giving your potential candidate less power. And if you are like Minnesota...
There is a couple states that divide their delegates up.
There are a few that do it right now.
But yeah, it's few and far between. I think on not a presidential basis, but to gerrymandering probably contributes a lot to the two-party system as well. Because if you are going to try to consolidate power through drawing districts, you can't do that for 10 different parties. You can't do that. It would be hard to do that for 3 different parties.
Good luck gerrymandering.
You know?
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, I think the fact that our court system has upheld gerrymandering as much as they has really cemented the two-party system. Because if you want to win congressional races and state and local level races that are districted, any districted seat, you need to belong to a party. You are not. Right. It's pretty hard to go.
True.
You know,
there's a reason why there's like a minuscule amount of independence out there, and it's because our structure is not set up that way. Nope. It's not because people don't want to run as independents. It's because it literally is designed to prohibit more than 2 parties, essentially.
Absolutely. And then it allows those parties on both sides to just pick one boogeyman and one enemy to focus on, and not have to, you know, when you're, again, it's like fighting a war. If you're fighting a single front war, is a lot easier than to fight a 3 or 4 front war. And if you've got all those other candidates around you, it makes that a lot harder.
I mean, talk about diverse thinking, and, you know, the what do they call it, like the battlefield of thought, or like I cannot remember what the phrase has been thrown around, the like every idea is worth challenging, or like considering. That sort of mindset sort of falls flat when you look at our system.
But anyway, just the basics, the foundations of it. I think most people understand that we've got 2 parties that are, you know, real parties worth talking about, which is Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah, and essentially at this point, all the smaller independent parties sort of just fall on somewhat of a scale of like how much of a centrist or left or right do you sort of lean. But they all generally kind of vote, one way or the other, because that's the way it has to be. So first one I put down here was Republican. It contains about 36 card-carrying members.
36 million.
Just 36 people.
Sounds like the Minnesota Republican Party.
Right, $36.
$36 in their bank account.
Yep. Or I was jokingly calling it the Raglican.
Reglicans.
It doesnit really roll off the tongue that well, but
yeah. And I updated kind of your thing a little bit here because both parties are kind of an umbrella. You have to fit into one or two boxes, and people generally don't fit into nice and tidily into one or two boxes.
People are very much on a spectrum on any idea, so it is.
So as much as we've kind of got the idea of the traditional Republican, whether that be the moderate Republican of old, the John McCains and the Dwight Eisenhowers of the fiscally conservative, maybe socially conservative.
Even Nixon to a certain extent.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Nixon, we could do a whole episode on Nixon.
We should.
Bring Kathy back for that.
Absolutely.
That was traditionally what the Republican Party was viewed as, was those, socially, fiscally conservative,
right. Traditionally conservative,
family values,
based off a lot of Christian values.
Which I mean, even the Christian stuff didn't really come in until Reagan in the 80s.
Yeah. But you could say like the values of the party may or may not have been religious, but like generally more aligned with those Christian values, I guess.
Yeah, sure. And then there's the Reagan Republicans, which was kind of the turning point. But this is an umbrella that libertarians are their own party, but a lot of libertarian ideals are considered conservative ideals, and a lot of libertarians vote Republican.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Then obviously we've got MAGA as the big kind of faction right now, which is
big in a way. Not in Congress. They just hold a minority few that are holding the rest of the GOP hostage, essentially.
And the Tea Party, for those who remember that, that was like MAGA Light. That was MAGA the prequel,
right?
Exactly. And then Christian nationalists, white nationalists, and I know we throw the word around fascist a lot, but genuinely, if you're looking at it from a political definition perspective,
right.
If you hold more fascist views, you generally tend to align with, in the United States, and you're voting, you're going to align more with the Republican Party, not.
Yeah, just look at it factually speaking, like the 9 or so metrics that define what fascism is. They unfortunately just do align more with what Republicans say and what Republicans vote for. So it's it's not our bias really.
No, I didn't put that in there for bias. It's just generally like if you harbor more fascist ideals or views and you're voting in the United States, this is gonna be the party. If you're voting a mainline party, the party that you're voting for.
Yeah.
And it's not. You just look at who the Klan
obviously
shows up to for rallies.
Well, right. Yeah, there's that. The Charlottesville, good people on both sides thing. But by no means are we saying that if you're Republican, you're fascist. Like,
it's just saying that that group also aligns with Republicans, which if you are a Republican and
I would be concerned
fascists are also hanging out in your circles, that's just something to do some inner reflecting on.
Right. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
But that's a you journey. That's not for us to discuss here at the moment.
Getting to the economic side, obviously fiscal conservatism is like a huge thing that's popped up. Which I think
makes no sense.
It's somewhat recent, isn't it? Like it has to be, because if you look at the way that Reagan and Nixon did like these just ginormous potentially tax cuts and sort of like made that popular, popularized tax cuts, which weren't really a thing before then.
It was, if you go back far enough, and this isn't less along party lines, more along conservative and progressive, conservative and liberal lines. Before the Great Depression, tax cuts were a big thing. Part of that led up to our issue with the Great Depression. It was very much a copy paste thing that led up to the Great Recession and our current tax policy.
Sure.
So it's not necessarily new, and no ideas are original ever.
Right.
I feel like.
Yeah, exactly. At this point in humanity.
But, the Great Depression happened, World War II happened, and a lot of change happened in the way that policies were run. And then you're absolutely right. From that point on, conservatism wasn't necessarily tied to tax cuts specifically. It might have been tied to funding cuts.
Yeah, I guess I just tie the modern Republican Party to an extent to Reagan, and because he was so popular, and because Reaganomics were so crazy, like everybody touted to be the absolute best thing since sliced bread, and was
Definitely
so popular.
not everybody.
Well, people who were Republicans.
Even his own-
okay, yeah, that's true. Daddy Bush was not a fan of the tax cuts, but he was.
I mean, at the time, they changed, but yeah, no, that definitely was an evolution of something that they've really grabbed onto. Obviously, under Eisenhower, it was like a 90% top tax rate,
Yeah.
and Eisenhower was a fairly conservative guy.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd say he was the last true moderate centrist Republican.
Probably. I would say maybe then Nixon.
Yeah.
If you wanna.
Like I said, we could have a whole conversation on Nixon because that goes both ways. He goes very extreme in some
Yes,
ways and
yes.
very, very progressive in other ways.
Yeah. Obviously, yeah.
So he's an interesting one. But Eisenhower was about as moderate centrist right down the middle as you were ever going to find in a politician.
But essentially, they believe that tax cuts and supply side economics, basically giving businesses more operating, just disposable income, whatever, disposable cash, will boost the GDP because of spending, because the businesses will be able to grow more, supposedly, and just generally believe that income tax is just not the best way to gain funds.
Yeah. It's not really backed up by any real numbers.
At least
but
historically, we can have a whole discussion about that.
All right. So that is what they generally believe is tax less, spend less, unless it's the military. They like to spend a lot on that. But tax
Yes,
less, spend less.
I have that in there. I have that in there. But yeah, also welfare is going back to Reagan. Welfare queens and just,
They assume that people, if given the option, will take advantage of government funds, which is your tax dollars, and therefore we should restrict those as much as possible.
right.
Again, more irony. I'm biting my tongue on. We're doing this impartially.
We're just right now. We're just getting through it. We got a whole section. We got a whole section later for our commentary to some extent.
Yep. They don't believe in government healthcare.
Right. They think it should be only sponsored by your healthcare by your employer, which I mean obviously has a lot of issues, and the reason why they want it to be that way is pointed. But
Once again,
like I
moving
said,
on.
yeah, once again,
School choice vouchers. They again just in doing spending cuts want to cut funding to education. And they often call that school choice or voucher programs that allows private industry to have more of their fingers in the education system.
or at least just religion at a minimum.
Yeah, religion, private. And I think a lot of this really comes down to allowing private industry to the free market, trying to do as objective as possible, allowing the free market to engage in the social needs of society versus having government do it. So,
yes, that's the theory.
And that's kind of what a lot of this really falls under.
Yeah, and that's a very it's very core to the Libertarian Party, which is why the Libertarian Party really bleeds into the Republican side of things, because a lot of those core beliefs transfer over, and some of them don't.
Oh yeah,
some of them don't, but
pretty much all the economic core beliefs.
Yeah, basically all the economic beliefs, and the role of government is very much at the core of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Then we have the environment, National Park Service, EPA, and basically climate change. I heard somewhere that the Republican Party would prefer that those solutions are market-based and that economic prosperity, environmental protection cannot be mutually exclusive. So you have to have economic growth while also protecting the environment.
And once again, goes back to having private business handle the needs of everything.
Yes, exactly. And then obviously traditional values with conservatism, having to do with Christian values, generally align. Certainly not all Christians, but generally speaking.
Evangelicals. I'd say the evangelicals
heavily so.
Evangelicals heavily aligned.
Catholics for sure. still vote very Republican. Catholic Hispanics oddly do not. They
Not
vote very-
oddly, I mean.
Well, yeah,
there's-
okay. Yeah,
we'll
but
get to that one down
compared-
here on
yeah.
immigration too.
Right, right.
So.
85, I looked this up, 85% of Republicans think that abortion should be illegal or only allowed under very few circumstances, which
That
is,
seems like a high number to me.
I was just looking up at like, it was a Pew Research poll.
I mean, I suppose if it's card carrying like registered Republicans, I can see
Right.
that.
Yeah, those are not
demographic.
just like the population.
Right.
But these are specifically Republicans that think that. So that's what your
Yeah.
party, that's what your people believe in the Republican Party.
And then again going back to why immigrants, Hispanics who are heavily Catholic, still
Right.
tend to not vote Republican. Is well, they Republicans tend to have much stronger opinions about restricting immigration.
And policing people who may or may not be immigrants.
Yes.
Who tend to be brown.
Yeah, they don't mind, stopping brown people to check just to make sure that they got their papers.
Right. Doesn't remind you of any other regime in history.
Not at all. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Not even a little bit.
They want they love funding ICE and
Yep.
they want
They really are focused on a strong border and deporting immigrants. I mean,
certain immigrants. Canadians don't get deported very often.
well, that's true. They also usually have a much easier way to come legally than
Very true. Defense spending. So again, they don't like spending money. The government shouldn't spend money on anything except blowing up other countries. That's that they love that.
it's-
the big
it's-
fans of boot in the ass.
it's
it's
really-
the American way.
It's funny that like it's sort of like the party of like anti like caring about global interests or like caring about-
Isolationism, nationalism,
right, exactly,
and then-
except for when it comes to interventionism in that it is somewhat divided within Republicans, granted, but like they're the party that's like we gotta go put the boot in their ass, like you said. So and definitely not decreasing defense funding.
No, they've never. To be fair, Democrats rarely ever vote to decrease defense funding
No,
either.
and
but
that's definitely something I want to talk about at a later point here. But so those are just kind of the general like policy lines and just sort of like the defining factors of like kind of like living within a government, right?
Yep.
Like those are just the basic items.
So Democrats,
Yeah,
which
Democrats.
have a solid 10, 11 million more registered members.
Yes, a lot more registered members, and the last election had, another like 10 million more votes.
Yeah, I mean it pretty much correlates with the number of registered.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
47 million registered members. Now, Democrats, even though we did the umbrella thing under the Conservative Party, the umbrella is much, much bigger under the Democratic Party.
It is a bit bigger.
Because you got to realize you go anywhere from slightly center right to fascism, you go anywhere from slightly center right to communism. Your only real option is the Democratic Party in our country.
Yeah, there's no like socialist party that has any sort of like power. There's a pretty small progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Most of them are centrists, and enough of them have what were historically conservative views now as Democrats.
Yep. So as you said here, generally liberal views is what we'll call
Yes,
it, and liberal has become such a diluted word.
Right.
At
Even
this
like the
point.
term neoliberalism, like people use it for literally everything. And it is a bit of a catch-all because it is sort of like it's sort of just the definition of like any policy that is supposed to be like this new like free way of like doing government and not being like a fascist government
Right.
or like a dictatorship or authoritarian, but sort of falls short on some of those things.
No, it absolutely does. But yeah, so I mean, it's obviously very heavily. If you consider like a party line Democrat, they're going to be right dead in the center, centrist.
Yeah, probably just straight up centrist. Like AOC would probably be somewhere between like a progressive and a socialist, democratic socialist. I think is what she says she is sometimes. obviously Bernie is the furthest left Democrat in.
Well, and he's not a Democrat. I mean, he's an
Well,
independent
right,
that
he's
ran as a
independent,
Democrat.
yeah, because there's two parties.
Yeah, which goes back to why that's
Yeah,
a
exactly.
problem. No, I'd say yeah, he's probably about as far as like mainline candidates go.
I think he's the
he's
furthest
as
left that
furthest
we've
left
had
you're gonna
in
get, and
decades.
he's not that far left. But then anybody else who falls under that, like Green Party people, Green Party again is a real party.
Yeah.
But I can't do much on the national
No.
stage. So those people often vote, and a lot of independents, all the Ralph Nader voters out
Yeah.
there from the
Yeah.
past. It's really the catch-all, big umbrella of the party. So it's hard to really nail down like what it means to be a Democrat. But under the
liberal.
and liberal, under the party tenets, I'd say it's pretty much the opposite of all the other stuff we just went through.
Yeah, they are very much for a progressive income tax in their stated goal of reducing inequality and basically pushing for high earners to pay a higher amount of taxes.
Yep.
Obviously, that. Never mind. We'll move on.
Yeah, okay. We've got lots of opinions, and we're really trying to keep them to ourselves, guys. And it's so hard, especially for me, who just blurts my opinion about everything all the fucking time.
Yeah, it's all your fault, actually.
It really is. I'll take responsibility for it.
Good.
But yeah, they have more support for social services. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, paid maternity leaves, those kinds of things that.
Right. Unemployment, wages,
Yep.
that sort of stuff. Those sort of social services that
Yep,
have a role that some
Absolutely.
people believe, at least, and they would prefer to have those services available than reduce taxes.
Yeah, they believe that there is more of a government's role in taking care of all of its citizens, regardless of their social
Or
status.
at least ensuring that there's the availability of resources.
Which then rolls into they generally are going to support higher minimum wages. And I say generally.
Yeah, although Joe Biden did not do a great job. doing the $15.
No. Also, Gavin Newsom, the super Democrat governor of California, voted against a minimum wage increase in his state as well. They generally,
will support that more, or at
Yeah.
least some of the more left-leaning members of the Democratic
Yeah.
Party will push.
if
generally
you're a
for,
Democratic Party voter, these are generally let's separate it from the leadership, and this is what you want if you are
True.
a voter within the party. You're going to generally support that. More often than not, you're probably going to support universal health care. Granted, the centrists tend to be a little more scared of that for some dumb reason.
or at least a universal insurance,
single
payer insurance,
or
something.
Obamacare type stuff. Yeah,
Right. Pretty murky.
yeah.
Murky stuff there.
It is, but if you think more people should have health care and not die alone in the street broke, then you're
Right.
probably
Or go into hundreds of thousands of dollars of medical debt.
under more of that Democratic umbrella.
Right.
They usually want to increase education funding kind of across the board, increase education standards,
Yeah.
push for more access to better education.
Yeah, universal pre-K is a big one right now.
Yep.
And charter schools have their place.
They do.
And I said that jokingly that Republicans should just go get a charter school on one of our previous episodes. And
They have a place to exist. It's just the problem is that they are being utilized in a way that they probably shouldn't be utilized. Which is a different video or a different podcast altogether.
right. They also support reform to college or free college and giving basically people more access through either lowering tuition or making tuition free based off certain income thresholds. So that's definitely something that is definitely high Democrat sort of policy.
They've got a lot of focus on more environmentally positive policies, especially when it comes to climate change. When it comes to more stringent EPA laws, fuel economy laws, all those kinds of things. Generally, if you're pro-environment, you're going to fall underneath this umbrella.
Yep.
they have been not always the greatest about supporting the LGBTQ community. But
Obviously, it's only been recent.
it is. But now recently, it seems pretty universal. That seems to be a pretty core tenet of at least giving the lip service to saying
I think
that,
you can very easily feel the friction from one side and the sort of unwavering lip service.
Yeah.
I think that's just an easy thing to say.
It is. It is. But and other disenfranchised communities, trying to make immigration easier, make people who are already here, undocumented immigrants,
Like the
give them
Dream Act, under
giving them
Obama, like that was huge. I think it was a super popular, not just between not just from Democrats, but just from the general population.
Well, yeah. If you don't want people here illegally, give them a way to be here legally. You know? So
and make sure they're high performing people. Like if that's your thing, you don't want them to be a drain on society. It's like, well, we got them. Here they are. Don't make them leave.
Yep. No. So I agree that just kind of disenfranchised groups in general, under the Democratic umbrella, tends to be more supportive and favorable in their policies towards those people. Yeah.
On the abortion thing, the same survey that I was looking at is only 4%. 4% of Democrats believe that abortion should be illegal.
Yeah.
Now, 75% think it should be legal in all or most cases.
There's some
doesn't necessarily
missing numbers from that. But
Well, so the rest of the percentage is just is the Democrats think it should be illegal under or it should only be legal under a few circumstances. So you could say 25% of Democrats think it should be illegal or only legal.
restricted.
Under,
It should have some
Or
restrictions.
it should be restricted.
So 25. Oh, it wouldn't even be 25.
yeah.
Oh yeah. 25% of Democrats think that abortion should have some or complete restriction.
Right.
4% is only complete restriction,
Right.
and then the remaining
None at
is some restriction in some form.
Right. Or just very few restrictions.
Democrats tend to be more heavily in favor of gun control.
Yeah, I don't know. We missed that one on the Republican side.
Republicans obviously they love their guns. Well, they love certain people having their guns.
Right.
That's again trying to be objective. I can't even not be objective though. That was just all of their gun control has been outright just to stop brown people from having guns. Like Reagan loved gun control because brown people had guns and it made him uncomfortable. Anyway,
but the Democrats do believe in gun control and gun measures. Obviously, Biden has pushed for some of those in his recent presidency, and they're in favor of more. And I don't know.
Yeah,
it is what it is.
No, it's definitely a policy platform that they beat the drum on a lot.
And I would say that Democrats are still fairly liberal in their usage of the American military forces, but certainly are more strategic, or it's like a last resort sort of thing.
You look at Clinton would just send planes over and bomb them and never put boots on the ground, and then you look at Bush, who's like, how many countries can we invade today? And stay there for 20 years. But yeah, no, our Democratic leadership has always loved the military almost as much as the Republicans do. They're just marginally less bomb heavy. But I think the voters specifically, people who vote Democrat would like to see a lot more restraint from the U.S. military, a lot more accountability, especially when it comes to funding the U.S. military.
Right. How about you pass an audit just one time?
Yeah, just one time would be great.
And then the century, maybe,
Democrats tend to be less supportive of things like Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, which is our military prison, for those who don't know, that is kind of like our loophole of we don't have to follow constitutional due process if we put people in Cuba.
We don't torture people.
Yeah, we aggressively interrogate them.
Right.
Enhanced interrogation.
Enhanced interrogation techniques. That's right.
But anyway, so then obviously we do have some third parties. There's
there's a bunch of them. There really is a pretty wide margin. Libertarian is the third largest political party.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can be a libertarian and a Republican, but
You can't. Well, I don't think you. Well, it depends on your state. I don't think you could register to both parties. I
Oh,
think you'd
sure.
have to be a
One or the
card
other.
carrying member of a single
Right.
party. Yeah, and I don't.
Honestly, I don't. I've never even like nobody's even like asked me like, "Hey, are you sure you want to be part of a particular party?" And
Well,
like, are
The
you gonna
state,
do that?
every state does it different, and that's where it gets weird. Is like sometimes to vote in a primary, you have to register.
And I don't think Minnesota's one of those states, are they?
I don't remember honestly. I don't think they are. No.
I don't because I
think
like
you
if
can vote-
nobody's ever like demanded to know like if I'm Republican or Democrat.
It's
ever.
not. It's when you sign up, when you register, you have to just pick on your registration.
Mm.
It's pretty simple. It's one of those things that you almost sign up for a party and you don't even realize you signed up for a
Sure.
party.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
But again, every state has its own rules about that. Like some states are like you can vote in both primaries or no primaries. You can do whatever you want. Some states are like you have to be registered with a party.
Right.
And it just goes right on your party registration or right on your voter registration that you are a member of said political party.
Yeah.
Which is another thing that I think restricts third-party access because if you're going to go
Right.
vote in a party or a primary, it's like, well, if I want an independent candidate, but in reality, I really don't want this mainline candidate. Like, I don't want Donald Trump, but I didn't want Hillary Clinton. So I want to vote in an independent primary, but I also want to vote for, the Democratic primary. And you got to choose one or the other. Well, that makes it really hard for an independent to break out. And
Right. Yeah. There's no room in there for somebody else that you might align yourself better.
Right, and so I don't know. Solve all the world's problems here. We ain't gonna do today.
We
so,
can try.
but yeah. So libertarians, and I always say libertarians are just Republicans that want to like legally get high and marry children, which is probably an inappropriate thing to say, but they do have a little bit of a history
There's
with.
there's some takes on here that I was researching and I was like, boy, there's a lot of L's on here. Just going down the list of policies, I'm like, that's an L, that's an L. I don't see how that's
It's some
functional
rough
as a
stuff.
I don't see how we can exist as a party or as a country with a lot of the things that is on here.
I every time somebody tells me they're a libertarian, I'm like, you are one of two things. You are either a really wealthy person, or you don't know what a libertarian
Right.
is,
No,
and you
that's what-
think you're a libertarian.
I was waiting for that. I was waiting for that. You have no clue what that actually means to how a country would be run.
Yeah, because the libertarian elevator pitch is great. The libertarian
Oh, yeah.
elevator pitch is like, I think gays should be allowed to protect their weed plants with guns. Like that's their elevator pitch, right?
No, they're like, we strongly oppose any government involvement in their personal, family lives, and businesses as long as they do no harm to another or interfere with anybody else's rights, which
Sounds great.
That sounds
Fuck
pretty
yeah.
darn good. But it turns out
doesn't quite work.
There's some issues with some of that, and that it's sort of tough to have a society when
When there's no government
there's
involvement.
no Uncle Sam there to sort of
And I think that
out
nothing
the ruler.
quite points this out quite as well as every time there's a natural disaster. Suddenly
Right.
the libertarians are nowhere to be found. It's
No.
just crickets. It's like,
Yeah.
when you need the federal government to show up and, pass out blankets and fix infrastructure and shit like that. And you ask libertarians, it's like, all right, what would your plan have been in this situation?
they just shouldn't have lived there.
Yeah.
They just shouldn't have lived in New Orleans.
No.
Why bother? Why live in Florida? There's so many hurricanes.
Everybody should live in like Nebraska or some
Everybody
shit.
should live in Kansas, Nebraska, Minnesota.
But then there's a tornado, so
Well, that's true. That's true. Even there, you can't get away from it. It's almost like there's things out of the control of humans that happen on this planet.
But yeah, so the libertarian ideology really falls apart pretty quickly when you're like, how would you want a society to run under these policies? And they don't have a whole lot of answers that I've seen personally.
Right.
And I would be happy to have a libertarian on one of these times
yeah,
and talk to him about it, because
We're not opposed to having any particular viewpoint on the show.
I think a lot of people like the pie in the sky idea. I like the pie in the sky idea of what a libertarian is.
It's a great elevator pitch.
It's
down
just
there.
yeah.
So some of the things that they might, if I was being a party person of the Libertarian Party, I would say that taxes or paying for government things it should be voluntary and not mandatory. There should not be any income taxes. There should not be an IRS. There should not be any federal programs, EPA, welfare, or even a Federal Reserve.
Fucking
I don't know how you exist in a globalist because we have globalism now. Like
it's a thing. You
we
can't put the
rely-
cat back in the bag. Like
we
you
rely
can't
on
undo
China.
that.
We rely on the European Union. We rely on the world to buy
To
our
exist,
products.
yeah.
To buy their products.
Uh-huh.
And so I don't know how you have a currency and a way to do that without a Federal Reserve. But that's something that they willingly put out there as that's what their belief is.
Also, voluntary taxes is something everybody does. You know.
Well, no, because otherwise you'll go to jail if you don't pay your taxes. And it's like, yeah, that's true.
No, but I'm saying, like, given the option, everybody would just pay their taxes out of the goodness of their hearts.
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
of
that's
course.
obviously
You know.
nobody's looking for tax loopholes
No,
ever.
nobody ever doesn't want to pay money in.
God damn it! I'm doing it again. I'm sorry. I'm
Well,
sorry.
Okay, the first two I definitely wanted us to get through to a certain extent, but the Libertarian Party, I can't really give them as much grace.
Yeah, that's fair.
So we'll go to the next one though. They strongly, it's like their core belief is the free market, and they believe that the only role that government should play is basically to protect your property rights, adjudicate disputes, and somehow facilitate trade or free trade. I don't know how you do those things without some sort of administration that requires funding that you probably should be mandated to pay into.
Right?
Because you want everybody to have adjudication of disputes or some sort of law enforcement or judges to be like, yep, that dude murdered the other person.
Yeah.
They should go in the jail. They should be locked up.
Yeah, and I always think protect property rights always being one of the top.
It's a huge thing, property rights.
Well, and that again automatically harms other people because once you have no restrictions on how property rights are gained,
Right. Yeah.
then if you don't have property, you don't have rights. That's
didn't
literally
even-
all your
yeah.
rights are tied to property.
I didn't even get into the deep
Oh my God.
theoretical stuff in there, but I don't recommend you go looking for it. But if you are interested,
Yeah.
I would recommend looking into just how people say that these things they can stand on their own.
Yeah. I also recommend if you think you're a libertarian, go actually read their all the way through. Read their platform and just be like, if you can put the dots together on how that works,
I mean,
more
more power to you. Everybody has their own thought process, but yeah. We'll go to the next one though. So they do not believe in a healthcare system or insurance system or any regulation for a healthcare at all. They don't think Medicare or Medicaid should exist. So another thing is, I don't know how you have
just die in the street already. For fuck's sake, why are you still living if you can't be a productive member providing for the people with property rights? That's really what they're doing is protecting the people with property rights.
Yeah, how do you know that somebody's a doctor and not just a quack?
Right.
Like how do
Right.
you form a hospital? I get the companies are going to rule everything in this libertarian utopia, but how do you know that those companies are good? Because they have their own rating platforms.
Because
they just pay for their own ratings.
companies are inherently good. Hello.
Yeah, you're right.
Rich people always want to do
And they know
the
what's best for
nice and the
everybody.
best thing. So how they're rich is because they were the smartest
Yeah, clearly they didn't get any sort of advantage
and
or
the
didn't
nicest.
take advantage of anybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's how they're gonna do that. And we definitely wouldn't go back to doctors who are like, you got ghosts in your blood. You
Right,
know?
we need to let your blood.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna wash my hands, by the way.
Yeah.
I just don't believe
I don't-
that germs are real. So we're not gonna worry.
I haven't
about
seen one. Have you?
it. I've never seen one. Okay. They are also very pro Second Amendment for everybody. By the way.
Yeah.
Black, white people, gays, trans. Everybody should have a gun, and they should just carry it around with them at all times to protect themselves. Essentially. They also-
And you know what? I mean, arming
no.
disenfranchised communities, not necessarily the worst
Okay,
thing in
yes.
the world. Like, the most at-risk people having a way to defend themselves. I'll give them that. You know what? If we could extend the Second Amendment rights to all the people who are currently the victims of
Well, see,
things.
that sort of perpetuates this like feeling that like you always have to be on guard as some of those people.
That's a fair point.
And who wants to always have to carry a weapon on them just to feel like they can walk down the street?
No, and I don't.
I know
like,
you're just joking, but like that's sort of like the first thing that comes
Oh,
to
and
mind
I mean-
when people say that's like, oh, we should all have guns, more people with guns. It's like,
Absolutely,
well,
no.
Do you want to live in a society that is more volatile, or do you want to live in a society that is less volatile?
more people with guns is not the answer. Currently, our gun laws are set up to restrict access to guns to the people who arguably would need them the
Okay, yeah,
most.
yeah,
That's where I was getting
No,
at with
that's
that.
fact. That's right. That's right. They would also prefer to legalize, according to them, victimless crimes, quote unquote. Basically, weed. They also believe that. We should be
pro-choice.
Pro-choice.
Like I said, there's social issues. I'm 100% on board with their outright social issues. If it's not tied to economics, libertarian social issues
Well,
are
right,
great.
because their elevator speech basically only pertains to social issues. If they had any other meaning for the economic side of things, it would not make sense. But their elevator pitch,
that's what their big sell is. And absolutely, I am fully on board. Everything the libertarians say when it comes to their social pitch, their social platform, I'm on board with if it's not tied in any way, shape, or form to economics.
basic needs of humans, like education,
Yeah.
healthcare. Like
I said, just take, if there's no money involved, I'm all for their social policies. It's just like, don't be a shitty person to other people and let people live their lives the way they want. That's a great platform, and that's why their elevator speech sells it to, what did you say, 750,000 people?
750,000 people. Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, as you said, they don't want public schools. They don't want any they don't want the government doing anything at all.
No,
I don't
right.
know who they think is going to build the fucking roads.
I don't know who's. You're gonna have to group together on your own. You're gonna have to form your own coalition to build particular roads that you find valuable. And
then how are you going to get the eminent domain to do that? So now you're going to have to get all of your
property rights?
fucking A. Like their own arguments just fucking fall apart in, oh my god. All right. Anyway,
That's basically it. The last thing though is they do believe that immigration needs to be reformed and that it is needlessly complicated, takes way too long, and that people need more reasonable access because they want more people to be able to work.
Yeah.
Which is totally fair. We have a worker shortage in this country. It totally makes sense to want to have more people who are potentially unskilled, but also we need some more skilled people too. So, like,
absolutely. And again, once again, they're social issues that are
it
not
doesn't
super
cost
directly
anybody anything.
As long as they don't got to pay for it,
Right.
then that's really what it comes down to. If it's like you would need to contribute a small amount of money to make this a reality, they're like, nope, absolutely not. But it's like, if I don't have to pay for it, you do
cannot
you
make
though.
me do it though. Maybe if I like it, I'll help out. But and if you're a nice person,
Yeah. So anyway, so those are the big three. I think
those are
Green
the
Party is
established.
would probably be the fourth one.
So,
I feel like
so. There's a couple other ones that are
we got
out
Jill
there.
Stein, who's had a fair amount of name
Yeah,
recognition.
Green Party is about 250,000 people. The Constitution Party is about 125.
So was I right? Then Green Party's the the fourth biggest party after
I guess you
Libertarian.
could call the American Independent Party.
I suppose.
600,000 in California, but I think it's very like specific to the state of California. They don't.
Also, how can you be independent and part of a party? That would make it a little.
Well, it's a party of not being part of the parties.
Okay.
It's. I mean, I can understand. Like,
Yeah.
I want to be the third party, right?
yeah.
And not have to be one or the other. I don't know how you get people to rally behind that, other than to say that I dislike that there's a two-party system.
Yeah.
Because if you're independent, then your views could potentially be
anything. And that's the point. That's why I was like, you can't be an independent and be part of a party, because being independent specifically means you are not part of a party. You are independent. But yeah, no, I get your point. So I don't know. I'd
There's
say
a Working Families Party in a couple states that got a couple 100,000 votes this last presidential election. The Alliance Party is in Minnesota, apparently. They got like 80,000 votes in 2019.
I think we get the
Legalize marijuana now.
Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah, that was big for Minnesota. I voted for a couple of the sub seats. I voted for like Ilhan, and then basically everybody else I didn't know because I was an uninformed voter.
You voted legal weed now.
I just was like, yep, that seems good to me.
I
but
love.
now I don't have
love,
to do that.
I
so.
love that party, like their entire party platform is just the name of the party
Yeah,
too.
it's the name of the one policy they're for, and it's the name. So I don't know what they're gonna do now. Clearly, they gotta shift, or just
legalize
dissolve.
heroin now.
No.
But yeah, so there's some other bigger ones, biggish ones. You know, we're a country of 320 something million people or 350 million people.
Considering it's a pretty small number of membership for a lot of these. Even the Republican is 10% and Democrat is like 12, 15%. So it's like really there's maybe 25% of the population has stated that they're part of a
card-carrying
party.
members of a party. Yeah,
Right.
So that kind of, I guess, informs us.
Yeah, these are
about
the
as
major
well.
parties. Obviously, there's a huge spectrum and a multitude of issues that sort of are like far left leaning, right leaning, authoritarian, or like nationalistic. There's like basically the real way to determine somebody's like political leanings is they almost need to do like 10 different values or 10 different issues, and then just like make a conglomeration of like where you lie on like that
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, so these leanings tend to kind of flow or change with generational demographics, as many things do.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it's specifically tied to age. I really do think it's specifically tied to generation, specifically because like our generation was always told you'll get more conservative as you get older, and those people were wrong. I
think Gen X was probably told. Obviously, I don't know that for sure, but I feel like it's been a thing for a while now.
I don't think Gen X was told anything. They didn't know where their parents were.
That's possible. I don't know.
But like boomers and some of the silent gen, it was very popular. I remember growing up, the older generation telling us that oh yeah, you're
once you get money and have a family, you're gonna want to be conservative.
And I think that shift for them was very much tied to their generational influences and their economic influences at the time. That unfortunately they kind of took away from everybody who came after them. So it hasn't. I haven't seen that shift.
I mean, like current events generally do impact generations where who's popular, what's happening during your where your formative years are. Generally tends to have a large impact. It's just that we haven't had enough time for millennials and Gen Z, obviously, to really like define like what was the moment and where does that exactly lie. We know like generally like where we're leaning, obviously, but like we don't have like we know that Reagan was formative for
right. And I think 9/11 and the Great Recession, the housing bubble thing for us as millennials were really those kind of defining moments. And then the fact that like nothing ever got better after that, like
it's pretty much the status quo. After that,
like a lot of boomers were pretty young during like the Vietnam War and stuff, and it was like a shitty time and it was a turbulent time. And it was coming off the heels of the civil rights movement for the silent gen and everything like that. And then things got better for a while. Like things were okay-ish. The Cold War ended, and the economy got good in the 90s, and like
the 90s for sure.
Things was decent, and then
and for the regular people, generally, especially like you just look at like home values, like home values like doubled or like tripled in like a decade or two, and it's like most people didn't do anything to make their homes better, but like, it's just worth more now, and that's just the way it is. So like that generation, it benefited from a lot of, I don't know, what do you call it, dumb luck potentially.
Oh my God, yeah.
Like it just happened to be that way. That's the way it fell.
They had the good financial sense to be born at the right time. And and this is the case. Millennials tend to be the most left leaning generation, I think, to date.
It depends on the issue, but Gen Z actually potentially is more left leaning than millennials in some areas.
Okay.
Actually, but I mean that's to be expected. They're younger, obviously, still. So the fable, you will go more conservative. I think it still has affected millennials, but it just in some millennials, but it hasn't been like the entire generation. It has still affected us, I think, to a certain extent.
Well, I guess what I was looking at here was Trump's job approval rating. Millennials were at 29%, which was the lowest, followed by Gen Z at 30%, which is,
Well,
negligible.
Anything less than 5%, I basically call it the same.
But then, the government should do more to solve problems. Gen Z feels like they've got some more increasing racial and ethnic diversity is good for society. We're right there again within 1% of each other on both.
In 2018, 70% of Gen Z said the government should play a bigger role in solving problems, and only 64% of millennials said the same thing. So, like I said, I think millennials and Gen Z are very
depends on the issue.
Aligned, but it does depend on the issue.
No, I'd agree with that. I do think too that millennials probably started life a little bit more conservative even and have shifted more progressive.
I know I did specifically.
I did too. Yeah,
I voted for Romney when I was 18 years old.
So if anything, I mean, and I don't have the numbers to back this up, but I feel
one of the two.
My anecdotal evidence or my anecdotal experience is that our generation has continually gotten more progressive, more left-leaning as we've gotten older.
I know I have. I know on the very bubble-ish type interface of Reddit, a lot of people say the same thing. That's what you expect from people on Reddit, though.
And I've got some reach with my audience and stuff that I've gotten that feeling is general. I feel pretty confident that. I'm sure the stats are out there, and I haven't looked them up yet. But if they are out there, I feel like our millennials are getting progressively more progressive.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. At least they're not getting as conservative as people would expect them to. But so I mean, was other than going like issue by issue, which I don't think we necessarily need to do with millennials and Gen Z. I think we should absolutely look to have more any sort of Gen Z representative on the show. I would love to have some Gen Z on the show. I'd love to have Gen X, some Boomers. I don't care.
Absolutely, yeah. No, we'll talk to anybody.
I think that would be a good conversation.
And I think it's cool because obviously I make a lot of generational content on TikTok and I tend to be pretty harsh on the boomers, and I want to go, and I've said this so many times, and like when I say this as a demographic, when you're speaking in demographics, it's automatically a generalization.
Well, right, of course.
And generalizing is important. Like everybody tries to act like generalizing is bad.
First order approximations exist for a reason, and that's because it's like the first thing that you see or you hear about somebody. But then when you meet them, obviously you're obligated to change your opinion based off of that interaction. So. By no means, even if somebody said they were Republican, I wouldn't immediately be like, oh, yeah, you are, forcing women to have your pro-birth. I don't assume that necessarily.
No, absolutely. And so like I want to say, because generalizations are still important. Demographics are still important
it's
because
simpler for sure.
Well, and there's just certain questions like to understand how we got to where we are today, we need to understand where we came from and why certain people voted certain ways, why they supported certain policies, why they still continue to vote this way. And you can't do that by saying, well, everybody's a special little snowflake.
No. Yeah, right, of course.
So you look at the majority and you say that this is what the majority did.
I see what you did there, though. Love it.
And so that's I think important. Like there's a lot of really progressive boomers out there and Gen Xers out there who absolutely are on par with the majority of millennials. There's some really shitty conservative fucking millennials out there.
Oh, yeah, like,
you know, like Ben Shapiro and
Vivek Ramaswamy.
yeah.
He's kind of a, you know,
Yeah.
he's a guy running for president.
He
and
is.
he's a
He
millennial.
gives me super libertarian vibes.
He
In fact,
definitely does. Well, that's because he's like debatey, and he's like, because libertarians love to debate.
Oh my
you
God. Oh,
on
yeah,
this stuff,
yeah.
which is like I love to debate politics too.
I do too.
But
they do it in a bit more edgelordy fashion, though. Like, if we're being honest,
Yes.
like,
that's the generalization for libertarians for sure.
and yeah, and what's the guy with the giant forehead from Turning Point USA? And
Oh, Charlie Kirk.
yeah, you know, so there's obviously plenty of shitty millennials out. Oh, shitty. Sorry, there's plenty of conservative millennials out there as well.
There's plenty of shitty millennials too,
You know,
obviously.
but as a rule of thumb, millennials tend to be millennials and Gen Z now tend to be a lot more left leaning, and unfortunately, we also tend to be a little bit more disengaged with the political process.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can say to any millennial or Gen Z or even some Gen X people and be like, "Yep, the system works perfectly. You should feel like a piece of crap for not wanting to participate." I think if you had that position, you would be brought to an insane asylum.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think anybody can say that with a straight face anymore. I think there's a clear clear issue with our politics, and this is something we were going to talk about. I don't think we're going to have time today. In that parties are that, you know,
Both parties are the same, but not the same.
not the same.
And this is something we do get a lot of.
Right. I don't think we're gonna have time today, but we're definitely gonna have a full episode on that because it is, maybe even the next episode after this we can have that because it kind of follows along with this discussion very closely. And there's a ton of videos out there. You could watch a 10-minute video about how the parties are the same or not the same. But I will just say, if you compare U.S. politics and the U.S. parties of the Democratic and Republican Party, you compare those to European parties, they are both right wing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
And
we don't
that's why they're
have
the
we don't have a left wing party in the United States, so we've got two right wing parties.
Yeah, when you only look at the two parties,
you know,
absolutely.
But I'd agree. I think it's worth pointing out, like, why I guess back on our last subject, why millennials tend to be more left leaning is going back to those
Generation defining moments.
Yeah. And I think a lot of millennials and now Gen Zs growing up with it too have lived through a lot of strife and hardship.
Yeah, obviously. How many once in a generation, or how many once in a century kind of economic recessions or economic crashes can we have?
Yeah, exactly. And just in general, like how many times do we have, you know, the longest war in our country's history happen next to the second longest war in our country's history happening?
Most costly war in our country's history.
And so you start looking at all of these things, and I think that those experiences cause a lot of empathy in people. That even if you do end up getting ahead, you do end up, like, I think, you know, both of us have. I wouldn't say we've got money by any means. We're
definitely working class, maybe middle class for Minnesota.
You know, but we have a house, we have, you know, cars, we have food on our table. Yeah. We're kind of getting into that.
We also don't have kids though.
We don't have kids, which is part of it. That helps.
Right. As married or soon to be married, you know, we as a household are doing pretty well. Minus kids.
Minus kids, because those fuckers are expensive.
That they are.
But knowing like we've been through it, and we've seen our friends go through it, and people we care about go through it. And it's like, I don't want other people to experience that just because it might take my tax bracket down 2%.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, I've said this over and over again. I do not mind putting all the money and then some that I pay towards health insurance premiums, or, you know, I do HSA. My work is a pretty good HSA plan for what I consider to be good.
Yeah.
I'll put all that money and then a little bit more into a fund to pay for healthcare, and like
and then everybody gets it. Like, great.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
guaranteed. It's guaranteed.
I don't think that anybody doesn't deserve it because of the decisions
Well,
they've made. Like,
apparently the United States and Israel voted to not have food be a human right. So there are people here in the United States that don't believe some of those things.
I know they do. There's tons of them, and they're always gigantic hypocrites because they're
Right.
I got lots of opinions about people like that.
Well, so I thought we'd sort of end the episode with each of us just getting a minute or two to just briefly kind of give our own political leanings, just a little bit of space, because obviously we both fall on the left side of things, and we both would vote Democrat 9 out of 10 times. Just because of how radical the Republican Party has become,
and because we have no other options, because we only have
we only have two parties. But what obviously we don't fall into like the centrists or the slightly conservatives side of the Democratic umbrella. I just thought we'd have just a couple minutes to each of us give just a little bit of dialogue.
Yeah, it's hard for me to figure out where I fall in, and we talked about this earlier, is you can't put people in a box, and that's the problem, is we have two boxes, and everybody needs to squeeze in and just, one size fits all type of situation.
Yeah.
And
nice.
It would be.
Make it easier, that's for sure. Be boring as hell, but
yeah, well, it's not boring now, that's for sure.
things are crazy, that's for sure.
It's exciting. Exciting isn't always good, but it's exciting.
Not for the best reasons.
Exciting like a car crash. But I'm clearly very progressive. Definitely on all the social issues. I believe that we should have, I don't think that anybody should go hungry. I don't think that anybody should go homeless. I don't believe that anybody should die because they can't afford fucking insulin. You know what I mean?
If anything, just not even like cancer care, right? Like something as basic as insulin.
Like it's just asinine to me, and it's asinine to me when I can look around the world and see that like other countries have this shit figured out. They make it work.
Yeah.
You can go to school. I think everybody should have an education. I
have the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they want to.
And the opportunity not being, well, if you can get a loan and go, like the opportunity, like
to
I believe
leave with $50,000 in student loan debt.
In societal equity, I really believe in that, and the numbers back it up that promotes economic prosperity, and I believe in a strong economy, and I'm probably more of a capitalist than a lot of my fellow people on my side of the aisle would feel. Probably a lot of my followers would be happy to hear about. But I believe the free market works absolutely amazing for things like, televisions and cars and like things that luxury or items, competition's great. It does spur innovation. There is definitely a problem of a planned economy kind of stifling innovation and responding to market needs.
Right.
But pure capitalism has never worked, will never work. The same as pure communism has never worked, will never work. Right. But I think that
unless you're Star Trek.
But unless you're once everybody's basic needs are met, then great, let capitalism do its thing. But I think that everybody, should have a basic decent standard of living. And so I guess I'm in the level of a Bernie Sanders progressive on that side, Democratic socialist, whatever you'd say. I tend to fall, and we'll have an episode on this more. I tend to be, I wouldn't even call it more right leaning. I'm even more left leaning when it comes to my beliefs about firearms. Because you go far enough left, you get your guns back.
Right. Yes. No, that's a thing for sure.
That is a thing. But I'm not. I really think the focus is far too much on gun control specifically, and not the foundational issues of why we have the problems that we have with it. Yeah, and I think we waste a lot of political capital. But that's a topic for a whole different video. And yeah, I very much a live and let live, and allow people to live a comfortable life. And I think that fits really well with economic prosperity, and I don't see why that is still a topic we're fighting on.
Yeah, I definitely would not say that anything that you just said is offensive by any means. I would agree with probably 95% of it. I'm also in that very progressive, SOC Dem, Democratic Socialist side, and I'm also on like all the socialist and like communist Reddit threads, and they like are as disgusted of these you and I type of people, and as far as in theory, as like we are potentially of like centrist liberal Democrats,
Right.
like. There's a whole spectrum of people that are sort of shitting on other people, and that's a big problem with the left. But
It is a huge problem.
regardless, I mean, obviously, like universal healthcare healthcare should be a right.
It's a no-brainer.
And
you
should not be barred from receiving life-saving care that really doesn't cost all that darn much.
No.
Like, not everything has to be free. So if you have the money, whatever. Like, certainly there's a role for very high-end things, and in capitalism in that. But for the 98% of things that go on in healthcare, and there's no reason why we shouldn't have that as a human right. Obviously, that Americans should be able to retire with some sort of retirement, and like if you work for 25, 30 years, 40 hours a week, like there should be no reason why you should not have be able to retire and spend the next 15 to 20 years
Absolutely.
living in maybe not the most in like luxurious way, but certainly a modest, comfortable living. Obviously poverty and income inequality are huge things that I'm thinking of how to get rid of every day. The right to organize is not always protected by our government, and that's something that absolutely needs to be. I mean, there's a whole list of things on here, but progressive social democrat is just it's an easy label to say.
It really is, but it's like, what does that mean? And and especially when they're out there calling like Joe Biden the extreme left and shit, when Joe Biden's like center right and seems
Oh my gosh, I posted a little photo of like where U.S. politicians would lie on a European scale to some of my buddies, and they're Republican, and it showed Biden on the center right, and they're like, oh, there's no way that's possible. Like it's unbelievable. He's totally left, and it's like, no,
you don't even understand what left is.
Yeah, generally speaking, if you rely on the mainstream news, you're not really gonna get anywhere beyond maybe like a centrist point of view these days. Well, I feel like that we definitely probably used up all of our time today. There's obviously, as with most topics, there's just a whole world that we just can't really get into. That we could take this hour or so and turn it into 10.
Definitely can.
And we will.
We will.
In separate episodes.
Broken up a little bit more digestibly. But yeah, no, I think revisiting are both parties the same, and because everybody says that, oh, they're both the same. You're looking, and in a way they are, and in a way they're not, and I think that is definitely a conversation we need to have. So
yes,
we will have that conversation. And I hope that people are a little bit more enlightened. I know that this is a bit more of a boring topic for some people who are
hopefully we made it somewhat entertaining. I mean,
hope so.
But yeah, it is pretty dry.
But I do think it is something that gets overlooked a lot because again, if you have passionate opinions about it, this is all back of your mind knowledge.
Right.
And if you don't, and you're just trying to understand, and nobody's willing to take the time.
And we're saying this now at the end of the episode. If you found this to be dry, you can just skip it.
Yep.
You can just go to the next one.
Yep. All right. Well, guys, again, we appreciate you listening. We hope we're providing you some content that you find valuable. And
Definitely.
Please interact with us on TikTok. We've got a Let Them Eat Toast TikTok. We've got a Let Them Eat Toast channel on the Off Jawagon YouTube channel or a playlist.
Podcast playlist.
A podcast playlist. We're obviously on all the major platforms. Feel free to comment or reach out to us on any of those platforms that allow you to interact. It is us interacting. We are not big or fancy enough to have people doing that for us.
It's us commenting back.
Yep, it's him or me, definitely. So follow us there, comment back, let us know what you want us to talk about, what you'd like to see us cover.
Yeah, and if there's anybody who is, anybody who wants to come on the show, we're definitely open to
talking about it,
talking about it, talking with you about it, and potentially having you on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thanks again for watching, guys. Thanks for sticking it out. We hope we're coming along and starting to slowly meet your expectations on what this podcast could be. And if not, well, go fuck yourself, I guess. Just kidding. We love you guys, and we'll see you next week.
Yep. Have a great day.